Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer with the podcast from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. One of the great contrasts in life is the apparent conflict between the inevitable and that which is subject to what we can call chance. It isn't altogether clear what the second category really is, but we are all familiar with it and believe to one degree or another in its integral place in our lives. There are some things that just have to happen. We have no problem whatsoever believing that an earthquake was something that was set in motion countless years or even millennia in the past and is simply playing out its predestined path when it actually happens. The same goes for meteorites, the phases of the moon, the changing of the seasons, and the aging process. These things are going to happen no matter what. We accept them as inevitable and leave it at that. But there are also those chance things that are so common that our lives seem to be virtually filled with them. We tend to associate chance with those things that are subject to the whims of the human mind, since they seem to be outside of the domain of the inevitable. But human choice is really anything but chance, at least according to the common perception of most people. It is a deliberate decision that wasn't really chance at all. However, so many things happen to us that do indeed appear to be chance that it is hard to escape the feeling that they are nothing more than a roll of the dice. A chance encounter with another person, an accidental finding of some item or thought, winning the lottery, or losing precious moments of time. These all leave us with the impression that they really didn't have to happen, and yet they did. Are they chance events, or are they somehow inevitable? Or are they some other category that we cannot quite put our finger on? The mixture of these two classes of events, plus the entire class of events based on human free choice, seems to make up the entire gamut of causes that result in the world that we live in. What other possibility is there that could be the ultimate cause of something that happens in the world? It is either those things which are inevitable, which we identify with nature and its many pathways, or human choice, or whatever this chance thing is. That third category, chance, is the one that really has no explanation whatsoever. What is it that makes things happen by chance? Nobody really has an answer to this question, but many of us live our lives with this common perception. We consider it to be very real, even though it doesn't make all that much sense. It happens that the Torah associates this third category with something that is anything but a random chance source. It identifies these things with none other than God. Judaism and most religions don't necessarily have any problem with either nature or human choice, but those chance things have to have some sort of cause behind them. This is precisely where the hand of God enters the picture. God doesn't tamper with our free will choices, and God is perfectly willing to allow the forces of nature to handle those inevitable things. But those apparently random things that are all over our lives are still in the hands of the divine. This week's Parsha is called Shemot. That word means names, an introductory term that opens the book of Exodus. In fact, in Jewish tradition, the book is not called Exodus at all, but this single word. The names are the names of the sons of Jacob who ended up living out the rest of their lives in Egypt when they settled there to ride out the rest of the years of the famine under the protection of their brother Joseph. This book starts right from the end of Genesis and leads into the next great epic in the history of the Israelites. Things quickly take a turn for the worse, as whatever favor that first generation of Israelites had was forgotten, and their descendants were oppressed and made into slaves. This sets the scene for the famous servitude in Egypt and the eventual redemption from that servitude in the form of the famous Exodus. The entire Parsha builds up the background for that epic story. First is the oppression itself. Next is the birth of Moshe and his being placed in an ark on the water by his mother to avoid the fate of the decree that all male babies would have to be killed at birth to prevent the Israelites from multiplying. As things turned out, he was spotted floating on the water by none other than the daughter of Pharaoh and brought up in the royal house. Moshe learned there that he himself is an Israelite and goes out to investigate the oppression that his people were subjected to. He goes so far as to interfere with this oppression, killing an Egyptian who was beating an Israelite. The Torah states that, quote, he looked this way and that and saw that there was no man. So he struck the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Following this, he spots two Israelites fighting and tries to interfere with them. They accused him of getting involved with things that were none of his business and seemed to be aware that he killed the Egyptian. Moshe senses that he could be in grave danger if this matter was known, so he flees from Egypt and ends up in the land of Midian, which was somewhere to the east. There he dwells by the proverbial well, where he sees the daughters of a local priest named Yitro being hassled by shepherds in the area. He rescues them from this predicament, and they bring him to their home. He ends up marrying one of the daughters and has a son through her. But the Torah reminds us the oppression of the Israelites continued and even got worse. However, quote, God heard their moaning and remembered the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God saw the children of Israel, and God knew. Following this is the fateful encounter of Moshe with God at the burning bush. This really sets things in motion. By the time that encounter is over, Moshe has been charged with his mission of redeeming the Israelites and is on his way back to Egypt. The rest of the parsha tells us about his first unfruitful efforts to organize the Israelites to fight for themselves. They reject him, saying that they have no great desire to rock the already precarious boat they were in by rebelling. The parsha ends with Moshe complaining to God that everything he was trying to do to fulfill his mission was failing, and there didn't seem to be any way to get the Exodus moving. Let's get back to that section where things were just building up. What if we were there witnessing all this? What would we think about the events unfolding right before our eyes? First, there was the birth of Moshe. Would anybody sense that this was the start of one of the most momentous events in the history of the world? It was just one more male baby born to the oppressed Israelites, with the single exception that this one was put through a desperate attempt to be spared. Then he was saved, a highly unexpected occurrence, but one that would appear to anyone to be the subject of chance. It just happened that Pharaoh's daughter was walking by the water, and she happened to take pity on him and bring him to her home. Was this inevitable? Was it the result of human choice? Or was it this mysterious cause of chance? Then we have Moshe's own experiences. While they certainly seem to be the product of human choice, we have to wonder. He somehow learns that he was an Israelite. He takes a highly risky interest in their suffering, going to the point of killing an Egyptian to save an Israelite. He then interferes with an Israelite squabble and understands that he has put himself in jeopardy with his actions. He flees, gets married, and ends up in a classic divine encounter with God. The Exodus has begun, even though the Israelites themselves are entirely unaware of it and even resistant to it when it is offered to them. This is all the result of human choice, but there certainly seems to be a great deal of chance mixed in with the choices. Why did things work out so that Moshe was able to believe that he was safe in killing that Egyptian? The Torah states that, quote, he looked this way and that and saw that there was no man. This was not Moshe's doing, nor was it inevitable. It happened. Chance made it so that Moshe believed that nobody was looking. The next event, with the Israelites fighting and Moshe attempting to break things up, revealed to him that he was anything but safe in his attempt to help his long-lost brethren. Why did this happen to him? Why did things work out so that he understood his predicament and knew that he had to flee? Why did he flee to the place that he did, finding a wife, fathering a son, and walking out in the desert to his fateful encounter at the burning bush? Much of this was Moshe's own doing, combined with the choices of others, but much seems to be the result of chance. However, this chance seems to be rooted in something that is anything but random. The Torah hints in a not-so-subtle manner that God was behind all this. Even though it is not stated blatantly, there is a tone to the whole narrative that suggests that these events were deliberately set in motion, even though they were not inevitable and were not entirely the product of human choice. It was God who was there in Moshe's first few months of life, sparing him at the water. It was God who inspired him to realize his nationality. It was God who set things up so that he would witness the oppression firsthand in order to get his mind going to do something, to change the situation. It was God who manipulated things so that he would become aware of his danger and the need to flee. Finally, it was God who saw that he was placed in a situation in Midian in which he could become the person he was destined to become. It is in that final verse right before the story of the burning bush that really reveals the role of the hidden hand of God in all this. Quote, God heard their moaning and remembered the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God saw the children of Israel, and God knew. With this crucial verse, we finally understand that none of this was what we might call a chance event. It was God who was running things behind the selective and protective veil of divine providence. The oppression, the suffering, the people and their history, these were all present and essential so that God could finally act in the open. How does the Torah know that God saw all this? It is because the Torah understands that the chance things of the world are not random at all. They are the will of God. It is in the final two words of that verse that zeroes in on this crucial conclusion. God knew. With these words, we also know. We know that this is the way things are. They may appear to be random chance, but they are known to God. How much of our own lives, seemingly devoid of any biblical significance and seemingly running on a healthy supply of chance events, is really under the direct watchful eye of God. Understanding this and believing this is the vital step in distinguishing the religious outlook on life. It may not be easy and it may not be obvious, but it is a highly significant change in personal outlook. It is the difference between chance and destiny. Shabbat Shalom.